to The Draft Room, a design podcast. My name is Tom Patterson. I'm the creative director with the Bold Agency here in Huntsville.
I'm Walton. I'm the creative director at Leary Studio, and we are both board members at the American Advertising Federation,
right.
where I'm the communications chair and Tom is the student outreach chair.
That's right.
Let's see, today I'm having a Midwinter Nights dram from High West, and it's phenomenal. Tom, what are you having?
I am having the Prisoner's Share, also from High West Distillery out of Park City, Utah, one of my favorite distilleries, for not only the way the whiskey tastes, but for their branding is amazing.
Also the way that it looks.
That's the way they look, and it drawed me in from the beginning. So that is what I keep coming back to for multiple different reasons. We are really excited today. We have a great episode. Today we're going to be talking about creative events both of our studios are involved in. We're going to be talking about huge events that are happening around Huntsville and North Alabama. But most importantly, our guest is Andy Anzollitto, who is a type designer, a brand designer. He's a really nice guy too. So I'm excited to have him on.
Yeah, 100%. So just to kind of get into projects that you and I are working on.
That's right.
Over at the studio, one of the things that we're working towards right now is a project called Behind the Cubicle. Kind of the idea is to bring founders and CEOs, owners of corporations, down to the human scale, right? So we've created this brand identity and brand strategy that is Behind the Cubicle. It's its own thing, and it gives company owners an opportunity to step onto a podcast and onto a social media platform that is a little bit more human, that's tailored to the listener, that's tailored to the consumer, so that they can get that personal brand benefit without the potential downfalls of, sort of delivering all of who they are to a single individual that could collapse out of nowhere, right?
Right. So it's that fine line between this kind of corporate, still brand identity, but also making it human and allowing people to connect to it.
Yeah.
And it's like a double-edged sword, though.
Yeah, 100%. It is certainly a double-edged sword because, you've seen, and there's countless examples of, corporations kind of delivering this effort to someone in their company, and that person, we were kind of saying off air, gets a DUI. And it's like, well, I don't know that I like company X as much as maybe I used to because Brandon did something he shouldn't have done.
Yeah, and then it takes Shaquille O'Neal to come in and rebrand the whole thing.
That's right.
He's really famous for doing that. So, yeah, absolutely.
Anyway, so what are you working on?
One project I want to highlight that Bold is involved in is we're getting into sort of the tourism industry, which I'm really excited about. So we got hired by the Mountain Lakes Chamber of Commerce, which is the Chamber of Commerce in Northeast Alabama, to brand and develop a campaign for Jackson County tourism. And if you're not familiar with Jackson County, there's a ton of different really cool things that most people know about in North Alabama, like Lake Guntersville, which is the #1 bass fishing tournament.
My favorite.
Where it happens, what me and you do all the time is go bass fishing. And then places like the unclaimed baggage, which everybody knows about in this area.
No doubt.
But also the great trails and caverns and outdoor sort of attractions they have, like the Cathedral Caverns or the Walls of Jericho.
Yeah.
So we did this really cool thing where we really wanted to highlight those particular attractions, and we did that by creating an individual badge or sticker for each one of those attractions. And we wanted to harken back to the old AAA triptychs. And if you're not familiar, AAA used to put out these kind of rack cards that gave you all the highlights for a particular city.
Sure.
And so when you drove that city, you could have that rack card and tick off the little things that you did. And it's really cool. And I thought, what a great concept, but now we can do it digitally. Now we can also do printed format. So it kind of still attracts people to collect things. So they'll go to like unclaimed baggage. There'll be a nice, 4x4 die cut sticker. You get to collect it. They'll collect also the brochure that goes with it, and they can put it on and say they've been to that location.
So how are you doing it digitally? Like, what does that system look like?
So just a website, and then there'll be pages that are directly connected to the campaign and hashtagged out, and it has QR codes all over all of it, so they can share out their experience.
Progress,
and the whole point of the campaign too, we named it "I'm Going Back" based off the Johnny Cash "I'm Going Back to Jackson" song, and we kind of stole that. But the thought is that we will talk to people who regularly visit Jackson County, and they'll give a testimonial. I love going to Lake Guntersville for the bass fishing, and I'm going back, sort of thing. So whole campaign around that. So a lot of the website and the brochure has testimonials on to tie back into that sort of slogan, that campaign. So we're gonna be launching it here in the summer, and look for us kind of putting it in the show notes and also putting it on Bold's website on a lot of the stuff that we're featuring. So we're really excited about it.
Yeah, that's sick.
And I'm really excited about getting into the tourism industry because there's so many places to go with it. I like to travel, and so I love doing things that I like doing. So designing things that I like doing. So it's kind of a cool space to be in.
Yeah. Okay. So on the tourism front,
something
that I thought as a person who lives in Huntsville, I would always have to, go on tour for.
Yeah.
Have you been to the Van Gogh experience?
No, but I know what you're talking about, and it looks brilliant. It looks like something that everybody needs to go to, and you nailed it. Like, it looks like something that should be in some other bigger city.
Yeah.
And it's right here off University.
Sure enough.
Where is it at?
In the Burlington Coat Factory, or once was. Yeah. A phenomenal rebrand testimonial, I think.
Right. The new art exhibit space for Huntsville is the
That's exactly
Burlington Coat Factory.
Big coat guy myself, so I was excited when they moved it in there. But that's going through August 31st.
Yes.
I haven't been out, so if you haven't been out,
Take the
have
kids.
time. Yep. Get out there.
And that immersive experience is what makes it unique. It's kind of all around you. Van Gogh is, a great artist to kind of have this showcased in that way. Very texture heavy and thick.
Yeah.
Medium that he used, the brushstrokes and stuff. So it's really a cool experience, and everything I've seen, it has me really attracted to it. So I think we're gonna head out there before it ends.
For sure.
We need to. The event share portion of this episode was brought to you by the American Advertising Federation of North Alabama, which we are board members of.
Yep.
And if you are in the design industry in any facet, this is the organization for you. So we're talking about designers, copywriters, illustrators, photographers.
Yeah, videographers, basically anyone kind of in the small business space.
That's right.
You're an advertiser.
Yeah, if you own a small business or are part of a small business, which we are,
yep.
You're in advertising, whether you like it or not. So this organization really is a great networking organization and support for anybody in this industry. So please check them out at aafna.org, and stay tuned on this podcast for discounts on membership and events.
Well, first, cheers.
Oh, there we go.
Cheers.
Yeah.
Did it.
Nailed it. That's the proper reaction.
Yeah, that's right.
That we want to see.
Yeah.
All right.
So, how did I arrive at being a type designer?
Yep. How did you get there? Yep.
The road was through graphic design.
Sure.
I think that's a more common outcome nowadays. But it's an interesting conclusion.
Sure.
In that any type of design discipline that starts getting really specialized, it can be a little opaque of like, how do you end up being like a person who just draws letters all the time? How do you end up being like a person who like builds houses? Like,
sure.
All these different kind of specializations. What I knew as a kid was like, I really liked drawing, and I was hoping to find an outcome where like I got to do that as a career.
Sure.
So I went into graphic design. At university, and then through that period of time, afterwards, like towards the end of college, I started getting really into letters and like type and building designs that are strictly type oriented.
Okay. And
it was kind of through that route, that was kind of when I was starting to learn that like type design was its own kind of like sub-discipline.
Sure.
And that like someone actually like builds, like makes the fonts and does that work. And that's how I got into it. So kind of through that route of like through graphic design into lettering, lettering is like slightly different than type in the sense that it is about contextual drawing of like type.
Okay.
So making type that's specific to maybe like an advertisement or a logo or something like that, like
Okay.
a specific context-based usage
Yep.
that's very custom. And then I just got so stoked on that.
Sure.
Like drawing, like just
Wild,
drawing
yeah.
like custom type that I was like, yeah, I guess I'll like finish the alphabet.
So I just want to mention real quick is, we've been in the graphic design world, and especially in town here for a good bit. I don't know very many typeface designers. I got, when I say you're a unicorn, I think that's so true. I don't know, and I know just enough to be dangerous with type, but to be specialized into it, I've only met a handful of people. It's just really interesting. It seems so niche. It seems so specific, and it's really just interesting, like to hear how you get into it, and to where that desire comes from to really just tweak on type is just insane to me.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's there's some like root impulses of like as a kid I was like really into music, and I loved going and seeing live events, and loved seeing like posters for like shows and like all the different bands. I was into like hard rock, so everyone has like hard rock and metal, so it's like everyone's got these like wild logos that are all like very expressive uses of like letters, and that I think there was always like and growing up in the 90s, there's so much like consumer products like toys and stuff like Power Rangers or like Transformers. Like, these are like very like iconic looking logos that are all type based. So there was always like this background inkling of like shapes can, like letters as shapes can kind of do some wild things.
Sure.
And then over time, like going into graphic design, working in branding, I think there's like a really powerful function that type can, if you're looking to express something conceptually, like you can, if you bake it into the text itself, you can represent it in an initial interaction, like in a logo.
Yeah.
But then if it's also carried through into the font you use, you get to reinforce whatever it is you're communicating
The mark,
through the website, through
print material, even
print material, digital material, and you get that it rhymes, right? Like it's rhyming with the branding material, but it's also bringing whatever like you put all that work into, right? Like building a logo that like feels resonant to a company and like emotionally aligned to whatever it's expressing. Like, maybe whatever it is, like if it's something you're trying to be like a real friendly restaurant that's like a neighborhood restaurant, and you put all this work into building this identity that expresses that, if you can carry that in through the type, you can also express those same feelings throughout the page, throughout the website, throughout all of it.
Okay, so that feels like a good segue to this question that I've kind of been thinking through. For something that kind of demands so much functionality as a type.
Yeah.
Like, how do you personally, I know there are probably rules for this, but how do you personally as a designer strike the balance of this is telling the story it needs to tell, this is reinforcing the ideology that it needs to reinforce, this is maybe rhyming in the way that it ought to rhyme, but also I can read it,
The functionality part, right? Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So how do I balance those things?
Yeah, what do you do? What do you as a designer do? Like, how do you strike that?
It depends on the context. If I'm making, on a top level,
Sure.
you have something like, what is the assignment? Like, what is the function here? Is the type going to be used for like setting paragraphs in a book? Do I need to read a whole page of text? Or is it for like a headline or like the top line of like of a newspaper, like the actual name of the newspaper?
Right.
the amount of legibility changes in between those
use case.
the use cases,
Yeah.
right? So like if you're setting paragraphs of text,
Sure.
it needs to be really legible because you
Okay.
need to not only factor in what does a letter look like or what does a word look like, but what does a line or a paragraph read? How does that
Sure.
come across?
Yeah.
So in that context, I think generally like the smaller type gets, the more legibility is a priority.
Sure.
The larger type gets and the more kind of situational it is,
Sure.
the less legibility is like an extreme anchor,
Yeah.
but it is still a sensitivity,
Yep.
right? So at larger sizes, I think you can get more expressive.
Okay.
This is generally you would call like a display face or
Sure.
something like that.
Sure. Okay. That makes a lot of sense.
Mhm.
Okay. So Tom and I, at our jobs today, even we're kind of looking through some of the work that you've done in the past.
Yeah.
Just it is stunning. I mean, truly, it's impressive.
Meh.
So I think
It's really
I
good.
mean, it's unbelievable, right? And so I think maybe we just love to talk about some of the stuff you actually have done,
Sure.
and so that we
Right.
can show that to people who are watching. And if you're only listening, we'd encourage you to kind of maybe pop in for this section on YouTube and watch this section, so that if you're listening, you can see some of the work that Andy has done. In any case, Tom, like, talk through some of the stuff you've seen that Andy's done.
Yeah. So, well, funny that the way we connected was you were new to town and you reached out to our studio because we had incidentally used one of the typefaces that you had designed
So
in a project that we had. So, I would like to talk about that for a second. Do you remember the typeface?
Yeah, it's TXC Pearl. Is that
yeah,
right?
That's right. Yeah, that was it.
And
And you had designed that typeface and licensed it to Adobe. Is that how that works?
sort of. It is licensing is it's this whole kind of like funny
Whole
thing.
other podcast.
sure.
I made this typeface, Pearl, and I had worked with a type foundry in Italy called Cast, who then co-published it with me through their website on their platform, which is called Cast Studies. And then through Cast, we have an agreement with Adobe for like distributing it.
Okay.
Yeah, there's this funny, it can be really complex, I think, for most folks, like using type of like how does like all this work? Like, I think it can often be like a strange enough occurrence of like the first realization, right, is like people make these things. Like,
That's right.
Yeah, no, I'm not kidding. That is that's like,
Yeah.
oh, okay, someone designed this.
Yep.
Like,
Yeah.
right? Because you think they're just there. You just think,
Yep. Oh, that's
oh, Adobe made that.
That's how the internet
Nope.
comes.
right. I mean, it's almost like pencils, right? Like
Yeah.
we all use pencils. We don't think about like someone makes this pencil.
Yeah, yeah.
So yeah, the first like realization is like someone makes this, like humans make this. And then there's another layer of like someone publishes these things. Those are
Yeah.
usually type foundries. That's the group. Or that's like what the industry calls like a company who publishes fonts.
Right.
It goes back to the history of the industry, which is once upon a time, the companies who made fonts were also the companies who like made the like in a pre-digital era made the actual metal types
Yeah.
or wood types
Letter
that you
settings,
printed
yeah.
with.
Wow.
So it was a literal metal foundry in which they were
Wow.
pouring hot metal and
To cast
making
those letters.
to
yeah.
cast actual
Wow.
letters.
Amazing. Yeah.
That's awesome.
And now it's just a residual cultural like connotation of like the word foundries has stuck around to refer to companies who publish type.
Sure.
And then on top of that, there's that most common layer, which is like the big touch point of like there's really big online platforms that foundries interact with
Okay.
to publish typefaces to a larger, wider
Sure.
audience. Adobe being one of the big ones, as well as like Google would be another one.
Yeah.
Total fonts, yeah.
Both of those are basically distributors who work with independent foundries
Got it.
to publish. They have like licensing agreements with the foundries to then publish to a larger
Yeah.
market.
Yeah. Okay. So maybe those questions that I've kind of asked have had like sort
Sure.
of definitive answers, but I'd like to lean on maybe hearing a little bit more about your
Yeah.
creative process. So if you kind of right now
Mm-hmm.
could design a typeface or a
Yeah.
font or maybe even a set of typefaces for a brand or personality, past or present, so living or dead if it's a person, who would that be? And then what characteristics would you try to sort of capture from that entity or individual to express who they are or what they are?
Yeah. Let me think about that.
No pressure.
This is where we cue the Jeopardy.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So when I worked on with Pearl, it's part of a larger project called Texaniche, which refers to the Texas Hill Country.
Okay.
The project was about exploring the typographic history of a location and place,
Yeah.
and using type as a lens to talk about like a social history of a geographic place.
Sure.
And so that's what Pearl was. Pearl was a documentation of kind of like a handmade style that I documented through examples of lettering and print ephemera from like the 1890s in the outer regions outside of like San Antonio and Austin,
Yeah.
west of those areas. And I think that approach, kind of to like what you're talking about, is a really interesting way to look at to be introspective and to kind of like think about type and graphics as like cultural artifacts.
Yeah.
So to answer your question, I would love to dig into New Orleans and like
Ooh.
southern Louisiana at large as like a place of like complex social history
Certainly.
and an environment that like like the timeline of Louisiana goes farther back, right, than like 1776. Like it's an older history than like the founding of the United States, and there's a lot of like complex stories involved. And I think that could be an interesting environment to like explore through like the presentation of type.
That's
Sort of
incredible.
like getting into the tourism sort of side of it,
Yeah.
right? Where you're
Oh my
kind of
goodness.
branding a particular area with a typeface, and
Yeah.
that would be really interesting. I got to imagine a lot of French influences in there. And,
Yeah.
For sure.
So
Yeah.
I see a lot of serifs and just
Yeah.
the fleur-de-lis.
I certainly don't think of New Orleans as a sans serif town. I mean, that would be ridiculous.
That's ridiculous.
That would
How
be
dare you even
ludicrous,
suggest that?
to be honest.
Unbelievable. Yeah, and I love like the cool part about when you build that kind of stuff, build stories or like explore stories through form and context with type.
Yep.
You get not only the opportunity to talk about those stories,
Sure.
you also get the opportunity to incorporate those stories into like new futures by actually, because type ultimately is like a functional thing that can be used and implemented. And for myself, it's been like a really cool thing to see y'all use type I've made, to see folks back home in like San Antonio use a font that I made that was like about.
That's gotta feel pretty good.
that
Like,
place.
coming to a new town, you don't
Sure.
know very many people here, and you look around and you're looking at other creatives in the area to see that there's another agency already using something you design. I mean, that's gotta feel like sort of. It's just gotta verify some of your work. It's just gotta feel really good, right?
It feels awesome. Yeah, thank you. It's a really weird space because type, you spend like a year, maybe 2 years,
I was
maybe
gonna
5
say,
years.
it's got to be insane,
Yeah.
right? Like to develop a whole alphabet.
So wild.
Yeah,
And
you
all the variations, all the weights, all the different ligatures, and everything that goes around, sort of the interplay between the characters themselves, right? Because you do a really good job in some of your
Mhm.
Gosh, yeah.
typefaces around that. I gotta imagine it's just. I imagine it's very satisfying to get done with a project but also very. Like finally we're done with this fucking like I'm
Yeah,
tired of this
sure.
typeface,
Yeah.
I'm tired of looking at it, and to spend 2 years on it would be insane, right? I mean, it's just like
We're talking about 2 years as if that's the longest amount of time
yeah.
I've spent.
So my bad. Yeah, it could go further than that. Right?
Yeah. So what does that mean? So like, just,
Give an average.
yeah.
Yeah.
Sure. I mean, it depends on how careful you want to be with publishing, but because like the other challenging thing is like you put a font out, right?
Yeah.
I don't get to go back around and be like, hey, can I have that font file back? I got a new one for you.
Oh,
Like,
right. Yeah.
you-
Yeah.
like if it's out there in the
It's
world, it's
there.
just
It's running around.
like you can do version history, like,
Yeah. Oh yeah.
but
Mm.
people still have old versions.
Wait, Andy,
They
let me
still
ask you a
use it.
question. You ever
Sure.
seen one of your typefaces in the wild and they're using it bad? And you're like, I wish. What I mean, they paired it with this other typeface,
Yeah.
or they're using it in
Yeah,
a.
you are not.
Have you ever
rhyming
seen
my
anything
type
like
right
that?
now.
No, I think every customer
There
makes
it
the
is.
right choice.
Nice work. Nice work,
Uh,
Andy the diplomat. I got it. Yeah.
No, I mean, it's a weird space because you make a thing and you put all this work and you have all these ideas of what you think a font is, right?
Yeah,
or
sure.
or what it's about. And then you just go, here, does anyone want this?
Mm.
And then people buy it, download it, use it, and then maybe like 90%, 80% never like contact you and tell you how they used it.
Of course not.
So it's just out, right? Because like
Yeah,
who
yeah.
thinks about that?
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
So these things are just out in the world and you never really hear necessarily unless someone reaches back out to you and says, hey, Andy, I use this font of yours.
I gotta imagine there's an AI tool that you can plug in and be like, find this font in the wild, and it would give you a report of how many people are using it.
Maybe,
Oh.
yeah.
And if you're not doing that, you should be doing that now.
Yeah, we gotta see that.
There's this, yeah.
So
Sure.
it's always exciting. I mean, my partner Amanda, she loves going to bookstores. She's really into books, and every time she goes to a bookstore, she tries to look for my font.
You're kidding. That's great.
And it's crazy. She has like a very good hit rate.
So she's going there and looking for it and finding it.
Well, she's going there because she loves books.
Yeah, I got you.
And then
Yeah.
while she's there,
Did you tell her to do this?
no,
You
it's
gave
like
her a mission? You're like, hey, go and.
Could you also
It's
take an
a-
Instagram
it's
video
a-
while you're doing
Not
it's
to
a
feed my ego
personal
anymore,
hobby.
But it'd be really cool if you went to Barnes and Noble and really find it.
there was a background there where we had done I had known some books had been made that like used my font.
Oh man.
Wow.
So I was aware that some publishers have licenses to these fonts and they are so in theory like it should pop up, like it should be on covers somewhere, right?
Yeah.
So she made it like a where's Waldo kind of game for herself.
Sure.
And she finds them.
That's incredible.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Gosh.
But
Does she hold it up in the store and be like, "My man did this"? Does that ever happen?
Yeah, it's like a
There you go.
boombox.
That's
It
what I
just-
see. That's what I see. That's what I see in my head happening.
Yeah, and then you're like, go up to cash and you're like, I made this. And they're
Yeah. And she's like, "So what?"
like, you're not the author.
Yeah, it doesn't look like it.
I don't think
Oh
so.
my god.
So it's always a treat to see people putting it to use.
Oh, I can
And,
imagine.
yeah.
Very rewarding.
And the context, like how it gets used or where it gets used is
You've never
Always
been bummed
mystery.
out though, seeing it and be like, "Oh man, they just the tracking here is just off." Whatever. Like you said something. You've never have you found something like that?
well, sure. There's always
Come on, let's dish. Let's go.
There's always situations where, you got some notes.
Yeah.
But I mean, to be totally honest about it, I'm just like legitimately, I am appreciative.
Oh,
Anytime someone like bothers to be like, ultimately to me, it indicates that they're like, hey, that's cool.
right.
I love that thing. I want to use that thing.
Yep.
maybe they don't make the choices I would make as a graphic designer,
Sure.
but it feels like such a big.
They made the right initial choice, and that's
Yeah,
all that
that's
matters.
exactly right. That's-
I feel appreciative of it. I'm like, this is awesome that anyone even wants to use
Oh,
it.
for sure. Yeah,
Sure.
I can imagine.
Okay, so as we close out, you have some books in front of us. I want to at least link them in the cards of the podcast.
Sure.
Snap us through why these books matter to you.
Yeah.
Just so kind of anyone listening who maybe is interested in type design would have sort of a good foundation to maybe work from.
Yeah. So I have a few books here. This one, we're just going to go top of stack to bottom of stack.
Perfect.
This is Designing Type Revivals by Ricardo Aloco. He did his PhD on this. It's dope. It is in the weeds.
A doctor of type.
You're
and getting
in
in
the
the weeds. That's it. Yeah,
Like, this one is in the weeds. It's in the weeds for being in the weeds. This book is just like, it's a methodological book about how to look at historical sources or like existing material and formulate your own ideas about them as you design your own versions of something old.
Okay.
Making
That's
something
incredible.
old, turning it new, how to go about it.
A little bit of stealing, tweaking, putting it out in the world,
Yeah, and it's about like,
as all of us do.
That's right.
sure, right? It's about a way you can approach it that is methodological and scientific and shows respect to your historical sources
All right.
as you build something new.
Okay.
Amazing.
That was super, like, I've found it to be like incredibly impactful. Is like, I like looking at a lot of old stuff.
Sure.
And this is, I think, one of the best books about process and like how to think about it.
Yeah, so there's nothing new under the sun, but it's a really good way to, revitalize
Yeah.
what's already under the sun.
Yeah. I
Fair
think That's
enough.
a pretty good take.
Okay.
This one is called The Stroke. It's a primer. The next two books are both like basically primers on what is type design
Okay.
and how do you think about making letters as a system. Ultimately, that's what an alphabet is. And this one takes an approach that is rooted in the tools, like so pens, pencils, and the method in which you form and shape type
Sure.
off of how you write them with your hand.
Yeah.
And then building that out from that perspective
okay.
into a system of letters that work together.
Got it.
Pretty beautiful stuff. Like, it's like really, I think it takes some pretty complex ideas and then boils them down into very like digestible and understandable like concepts.
Those are my favorite kind of concepts.
Yeah. So it's a good one. It's not, some of these are hard to find. I think this is back in print now.
Okay, well, we'll see if we can find it. And
Mhm.
we'll put a link up
put
to
in the
it.
show notes.
And it's short. It's like 80 pages, give or take.
Wonderful.
Breezy read.
I'm always interested to what typefaces they choose for their copy within a book, right? So like,
Yeah.
that's I'm gonna look at that up.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
They
What are
all
they-
have
what
like,
are they using
Yeah, yeah.
for legibility?
Must be
for
perfect.
design? Yeah, it's gotta be.
it's robust.
How long did it take them to pick the one they want to use? Yeah.
This one is Theory of Type Design by Gerard Unger. This is a work of love about the education of type design as like a community. And it is kind of like I would describe in a way, the counterpoint to The Stroke, in that it's another primer about type design, but it is more soup and nuts. So like there's a lexicon of terms in the back that it's like this whole, there's a whole glossary, right? Like, what does kerning mean? Like, what is a headline? What does humanist mean? So there's all these sweet terms, which when I was getting into this, you're just like reading forums, scouring the internet, like,
Yeah.
I know what that means. And
Yeah.
you're like, let me do that. So there's not a lot of environments where this like information is consolidated into a quick like desk side source. It's all right here. They also, Unger goes through and digs into all of the different concepts and ideas that go into type design, but also all the practical elements of it, of like, what is the character sets you're using? Like, what is kerning? What is all of these types of, like, what is a serif? What is a sans serif? All of these, like,
Tracking and letting. And,
yeah, all of that stuff, getting into it and including it in a single source. So it's very referenceable and it's also very approachable for a new designer.
Yeah.
And I just think it's absolutely wonderful.
It's got a pretty cover.
It does.
Yeah, super. It's got a,
Somebody worked really hard on that.
it's got bookmark,
Probably a designer.
footnotes. Yeah, it is a very beautiful
Gosh,
book to look
I
at.
love a good footnote, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
Like,
And a good bookmark. All right.
all right,
This
little-
one and this last one
Yeah.
is Scripts by Stephen Heller and Luis Feely. Luis is my old
right.
boss.
There we
Oh,
go, yeah.
wow.
And before, when we were talking about how did I get into design, how did I get into like type, I didn't go to a university that had necessarily a robust education about lettering or type design. In fact, there was no education about type design and some like suggestions for like lettering. And I think I saw someone online mention, I think it was like Jeff Rogers, this book. He's like, if you are into this, get it. It's worth its weight in gold. And I got it. And as you can see, I have dog-eared and bookmarked it front to back. And I just worked through this like page by page, just like taking in all the beautiful spreads and expressions of different like different scripts, and took it home and just tried to learn what was in between the covers on this book. And that's how I learned how to letter. And then later I worked for Luis.
Yeah.
And yeah, that was very special.
That's incredible. Okay, Andy, thank you so much for coming to hang out with us. This has been
Yeah.
a joy, truly. Thanks for taking us through your journey, sharing some of the things that made you who you are as a designer. Like I said, anything that you kind of talked about, all these books, the sort of your portfolio will all be in the cards, so that people can get to know you a little bit better. Other than that, thanks so much for coming to hang with us.
Here, let's have a cheers
One
to
more
the.
cheers, yeah.
Yeah. Cheers. Thanks for having me, guys.
So much, Andy.